Well, I think that's everyone, so might as well get started. Welcome everyone to our Pride of Work conference, I suppose, Winter Pride of Work edition. My name is Chris, I'm from again. You're all very welcome to the open. Hello also to the people who join us online as well. So our sessions today, or our day today, looks like this. So we'll start off with a session on LGBTQ plus inclusion in the public sector. This is our wonderful panel and chair, so very excited for that. After that, we'll have a break for the coffees and do all the other stuff that people need to do, smokes and teas, I suppose. And then we'll continue with another session on turning the rainbow green and our carbon neutrality initiatives this year. So without further ado, I suppose, I'm very delighted to be joined today by our chairperson, Philippa Ryder. She's the Dublin Pride Chair and has been working in the LGBTQ plus community and activism for a number of years now. So round of applause for Philippa. And then we have Adrian, who's the ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which sounds very fancy. And from Dublin City Council, we have Martina Malone and Amy Murphy, who are members of the LGBT Staff Network. And then last but not least, from the Department of Justice, Kerry Doyle. So thank you so much to our panelists as well for joining us today. Now in this first session, or this first panel, we're going to look at the public sector. The public sector, the public service, is the biggest employer in the state with over 300,000 employees. But like the wider society, wider Irish society in general, we've seen a number of changes with the decriminalisation of homosexuality, gender recognition, marriage equality. And all those changes obviously weren't just taking place in the wider society, but also within the public sector. And they had an impact on the employees, what they were allowed to do, what they were allowed to say, and obviously affected life and also the public sector in general. So our panel today is going to talk about that, the journey of the public sector when it comes to LGBTQ+ rights and inclusion, and what there still needs to be done. So I'm just going to wrap this because we only have 4 mics. Bring it over to the...
Well, I've got this one. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? It seems to be on. Yeah. Thank you everybody for coming along today for this Winter Pride at Work session. I'm delighted to be joined by, as Chris will be both named, Adrian, the ambassador to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and Martina, Kerry, and Amy from, Martina and Amy are from the Dublin City Council, and Kerry from the Department of Justice. So it's great to see you all here, and I think this is a really important topic to discuss. I myself have worked in 41 years, I retired in January, thank God. And it was changed over the years.
Indeed, but it's a more represent the people. And that means that as government service, You have to be really an example of all elements of society being included in it. And the idea behind that is also that you have to provide services, especially for the most vulnerable, which means that especially the vulnerable groups have to be part of you. And given the position of the LGBTQ plus the community over the years, but even now, it is important to have them there. Secondly, I'm talking then more about me as embassy. We have to represent the Netherlands abroad. We have to show that we are diverse. And that's why even we have a team of 12 people, and we have multiple letters from the LGBTIQ plus community in it. Thirdly, and that has to do with government, business, non-profit sector, any team. If you have diversity in your team, it means that you have different points of view. And that brings the best out of people. Having discussions, see how we can move ahead, rather than people who are all on the same page.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Having experienced diversity within the public service and setting up a diversity program within the Property Registration Authority where I work, I could see the benefits of diversity and inclusion, and indeed I talk about it all the time. So, Martina, perhaps you'd like to add something about the council?
Yeah, thank you. For those who don't know me, I'm Martina and I'm the chairperson of the City Council's LGBT staff network. I'm a senior staff officer and I work in the City Council's law department in the information management unit. When we set up the network in 2013, I think it might have been either a very brave or foolhardy thing to do because in 2013 or 20 years after the decriminalisation of homosexuality and in Dublin City Council at that stage, you would be forgiven for thinking that there wasn't a gay in the place other than myself and another woman who worked in the public libraries actually set the network up, and it has grown since then. But just in relation to the question itself, and I got the questions on Friday, and I let that question float around in my head over the weekend. And I think I alternated between feeling despair and rage, actually, for the simple reason that, yes, as Adrian has said and as Philippa has said, there's been huge progress for LGBT people over the last 40 years in Ireland generally, and our organisations very often, it's taken them an awful long time, an awful lot longer to catch up with where the rest of us are at. But I want to also say that I'm a very dedicated and committed public servant. I believe in the civil service and I believe in the public service, and I think we have an excellent civil service, very committed civil service who does exemplary work in maintaining our democracies and processes that protect our democracies. And I think we can see that with what I would call basket-case politics across the water and throughout Europe, and we have managed here to keep our heads very well, I think. However, and if you look at the way the civil service kicked into action, particularly during lockdown, and the way the Department of Health rallied and proved itself to be exemplary in dealing with the lockdown and rolling out of service and protecting Irish people, they did so very well. But at the same time, that department, you try saying that to somebody who's trans and who's trying to access the National Gender Service, and it may be a very different story. The experience is quite what it should be. And one of the reasons for that is the National Gender Service is probably it's under-resourced, but it's also because they have the expertise in what it is to be trans. They may have an expertise in what it is to be, they may have an expertise that is scientific or medical, but that doesn't mean they have an expertise in knowing what trans difference actually is. I would also say the same about the Department of Education, who continue to provide good quality education to our young people during the lockdown and in very difficult circumstances, liaising with parents who would find it difficult to provide homeschooling and online support from teachers. And at the same time, just this month alone, and that's November 2022, the Allow to publishes its report where where 76% of LGBT secondary school students don't feel safe in school. 58% of those LGBT secondary school students have listened to or have experienced homophobic bullying remarks or transphobic bullying remarks from the staff. 1 in 3 don't feel comfortable with their heterosexual cis peers, and 1 in 3 may not complete their leaving cert. Should be a huge concern to us, and it should be a huge concern to the Department of Education, and it should be a huge concern to us who go into the workplace. And we have LGBT people then who leave school, that's if they manage to survive their school experience, go into the colleges where they may have some reprieve, and then go into the workplace where you have to go through the whole thing again, where you carry that anxiety, and where there's nothing reflected back to you in the workplace. And that is the same for Dublin City Council. Yes, we've made great strides, thanks in no small part to the committed hard work and dedication of the LGBT committee, but where we still lack an understanding of what it means to be LGBT and different.
Thank you, Martina. Kerry, the Department of Justice have always seen as a progressive department. I think we vie with you for #1 place, because I don't know if we set up our D&I program before.
I think you got in there just
before.
yeah.
So, how would you see that it's important within, say, justice and the public service more widely? Do you think it's something that management particularly adhere to or engage with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Department of Justice are in the midst of their EDI process really being set in at the moment. There's a lot of work going on in that area of the department. But in terms of inclusion as a whole as well, I think the civil service is a really interesting place to look because of the way that we hire people. I mean, I don't want to take you through a whirlwind tour of the publicjobs.ie website or the process, but the majority of us are employed as generalists. We apply for a very broad role and we're picked up and we're plopped wherever there tends to be a vacancy. We might not have had a major amount of experience in that area before, but that's where we might end up. And there's a beauty in that because you could end up working on a team where there's 10 people who are all from completely and utterly different backgrounds. Every tiny team in the civil service is like a little microcosm of Irish society, and that's really, really interesting to work with it. And what I would say is inclusivity and equality in the civil service is really, really important to be seen by the public so that they feel welcome to join that. The more inclusive what we have to pull on is, the more inclusive those little microcosms are. So if you've got a team who are working on policy, on legislation that's going to affect a certain community, a certain area, you want as many different voices on that as possible. And that's why it's important to me. I think credit where credit's due with our colleagues in public jobs. They have done incredible work over the last couple of years in really diversifying the amount of people that are going for these jobs and joining the civil service. We've got all these amazing new inclusion programs and different ways to access the civil service. And we're going to see that grow and grow. There's going to be far more diversity in these teams, and it's really exciting to be a part of and to be in the middle of that. But that's why I think inclusivity is important in the civil service.
Yeah, and I think I know my own department is very keen on that, and with the basically for anybody wanting to go into the civil service or public service, there is a demand. There's a huge demand, and there's a shortage of candidates. And I hear that from I was talking to my HR manager or the head of operations from the PRA, who might be here today, but they were saying to me over lunch a couple of weeks back that they cannot get enough applicants for the jobs that they have. There's something like 20, I'm a surveyor and digital mapping specialist, and there's 20 vacancies in the PRA for that role, and can't get the candidates. They're all getting better jobs elsewhere. So we have to make the public service attractive, and we have to make it inclusive and diverse, and get people in, get good quality applicants in. So Amy, you joined DCC. I'm not sure when you joined.
I joined DC in 1998 on the 2nd June 1998.
Oh, right, yeah.
At the transition there, I figured out what I was in September 2016. You know, it was always a needle in the back of my mind. The question for me is like the biggest thing about LGBT community or what we do in the organisation is visibility. Because as growing up as a child, I was very connected to my identity, but then society showing it out of me. And then I had this scratching in the back of my mind about what I was. And then, you know, it came through. And I didn't have a connection because I wasn't gay, so I couldn't figure it out yet. But when I figured it out, I had a community that I connect into, and visibility is really important to me. So by connecting, by being a member of the LGBT community, then it connects me to a bunch of people or a network who had similar experiences, life challenges, where society said, no, it's not right to do this, but actually it is, it's normal. So that was really important to me. Like, I was able to network beyond that. So it's great for me to see like what kind of organisation, see out, open, proud LGBT people. There was another trans lady in the organisation. She's moved on. We used to have great coffees and chats. It's really visibility for me is what's important. There needs to be people there to reflect it back on other people's lives. People need to be able to see, well, there's a successful trans woman, or there's a successful lesbian or gay man, because we see it in all other aspects of life. So we need to be able to see that this is normal, everything that we do is normal. Family for me is really important, and say I come from a family of all adoptees, and we were taught from a very early age that all you need is love. And that should be applied to the LGBT family. So in the workplace, if there is a lesbian couple with children, you know, that normalises it, because there's nothing wrong with that in the area that take that there's very wholesome, that's a very wholesome family environment. And I think, you know, having that visibility in the workplace, normalising that, just making it normal is really important.
I think as well, you touched on it there about role models and people who are willing to stand up and be visible, as you said, are just so important. I know in the VRA when I joined, there was nobody, but that was in 1980. Ireland was a totally different place. But by 2016, by 2017, there were people beginning to be visible, and I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to actually be that visible person, be that role model within the POA. And I think if you're sitting on this panel, you're all the same. You're all the role models that the young LGBTQ people can aspire to be. And I think that's a legacy that we can all be proud of going forward. Would anybody else like to say anything to that question, or will we move on?
Maybe if I can add one thing to what you said as being a role model. I think that indeed the leadership of any organization, especially government service, should show their commitment, should be that role model, should make sure that diversity and inclusion is core of their business. And for us as embassy, we get standard, we have to write an annual plan, we had a discussion yesterday. Key issue there is diversity and inclusion. What do you do for your own team? What do you do towards the community? We have in our ministry, we have an LGBTQ plus association as well. I don't know how it is in Ireland, but in the Netherlands, like my Secretary General is a member of that. The head of human resources is a member of that. Various ambassadors are a member of that. Not because they're gay or lesbian or anything, but above all to show their commitment to especially the LGBTQ plus community in the ministry. Make them feel safe.
Do you think, well, I don't know if it's my view on, in Ireland, I think maybe there's a fear of non-LGBT people being associated with LGBT communities. I'm just throwing it out, that's just after coming to my mind. You know, sometimes when you ask non-LGBT people to, or LGBTQI people to get involved in this. They just think it's not at scale and kind of stay away. Or do you know that kind of way? So like real allies are sorry, people who are involved are in our space, understand our space, understand the challenges that we've gone through, understand that we need to represent ourselves. So it seems more progressive in the Netherlands.
Martina, Peter?
Just to come in on that, in relation to the way it works in Dublin City Council is because we have diverse departments, very different styles of management, that each of those departments probably have their own kind of type of culture. So the approach in Dublin City Council has been that equality, diversity and inclusion is a HR function. And so it's seen to be the role of a particular section within HR. And their roles are considered to have the expertise. There's absolutely no expertise if, in relation to diversity and inclusion, it's not led by the people with the lived experience. And that will vary from department to department. For example, and these things can be quite simple to do. They're actually quite simple. But I told my own line manager, Samantha, that I would be coming down here, that I would be on the panel without any hesitation whatsoever. Oh yes, I'd be there when I left the senior management team, the law department, no, and there was immediate support. And I think the key is, instead of rolling out policies and making speeches here, there and everywhere about what equality, diversity, inclusion is, that we may need our expertise, may need to stop talking and learn to listen, and really listen and get in with those different, those people from different backgrounds, diverse minority backgrounds, to see what the issues really are that are facing us and how those challenges can be addressed, so that those kids in school who may fall out of the system, and there's quite a number of them look like they might, when they come into their workplaces, they can come in as people who are quite together and quite grounded young adults and adults going out into the workplace and so on. So that's what I'm saying.
One thing, trying to be a little bit of a role model, one thing that I introduced in job interviews is a very simple question. Where are you different from everybody else? What makes you stand out? The idea behind that is be different and feel safe to be different. And feel safe to share experiences. And I actually reject people who can't come up with a good answer to that. I mean, it's because it basically means that it's...
Embrace your diversity and embrace your difference. And that's coming more and more to the fore now, where that sort of question is being asked. And I think it's great, because diversity implies that you're willing to think outside the box, and within the LGBTQ community, we do not like boxes, do we? So the next question for the panel is there anything you've done within your professional capacity that supported LGBTQ plus inclusion or visibility? It could be helping organise pride participation, developing policies, etc. Personally, I was involved. I was chair of the LGBTQ plus subcommittee of the D&I programme within the PRA, and we set up Pride went to the Pride parades and held a few social events. And just to give you an example of how things can progress, the first social evening that we had in the PRA, my wife and myself, my best friend, and one person from the Yes Equality campaign came to the social evening. 4 people sitting downstairs in Pantybar. The following year, everybody was really enthusiastic and everything, and we got 40, including senior management and board members from the PRA. 40 people. So tenfold increase, which shows the possibilities. It shows that if you just hold an event, if one person, 2 people turn up, it's being held and you can refer back to the following year. So that's one thing that we did in the PRA that was very successful, and the following year, then was 2018, 2019, the social media was continued. We got people along, and straight, cis people came as well as all the LGBTQ community within the PRA. So, who wants to take that question? What have you done basically? Yeah, Kerry?
Yeah, okay. This is probably a good one for Justice because we have been, I suppose, one of the central areas for the public and civil service Pride involvement every year. This began back in the pre-COVID years, 2018, when we were in the Department of Justice and Equality. We've since lost the equality part and moved to children. So because we had, this equality sector, we were also heading up the LGBTQ strategy at the time as well. And our previous chair, Neil Ward, was marching at Pride with Dublin City Council, I think it was, back in 2018, and looked around and went, why aren't we doing this? Where is the civil service? Like, why are we not represented in this? So came back, and it's interesting, we're talking about role models and upper management and things, but we have been really lucky in the department in that our management board are so supportive of everything we do. They attend meetings, they come to the AGMs, they come to drinks. The Secretary General leads the Pride Parade. They're very, very involved. So because we had this kind of central thing with the strategy and everything, one of the aims of the strategy was to have a public and civil service wide network. And we thought, well, why can't we start that? Let's get the ball rolling on this. So we were very lucky in that property registration, DFA, who are here today as well, they already had networks. They just kind of picked us on the post basically and got in there before us. The guards also had a group as well, so we talked to them, we learned about their struggles, what worked for them, what didn't, and from all this amazing information we were able to set up this network. It's gone from strength to strength. The first year we marched in Pride was in 2019, and we had 640 members of the public and civil service march that year behind 7 Secretary Generals. We took a break for COVID, obviously. We came back last year and it was 1,500 people marched from public and civil service. You're talking about you can see it in the numbers. It's really incredible to see this grow. Like when we started, like I said, it was DFA, it's property registration ourselves. There wasn't many networks. There's networks in nearly every government department now, and they're all working towards the same goal. It's really exciting to see. It's good to be like in justice, and we've still kind of kept this part, despite the fact that we've kind of lost the equality part. But we've become this central organisation area, I suppose. But it's really amazing, and it's just great to see the numbers grow every year. Hopefully it'll be bigger again next year as well.
Adrian, do you know?
Can I ask Kerry a question on that? In the networks, is it to do with social and support, or does it get into the actual the fabric of the department and trying to change from within? Is that something that's used to?
That's like a really, really good question, and it's definitely something that I suppose you could say it's been a struggle to learn what we actually do. And one of the very first things that we had to do as a network, especially being within justice, because we're so involved in policy, we're so involved in legislation, that we had to kind of sit down and work out what are the aims and objectives of this network. And it can be difficult. You'll get people who will get very involved in committees and steering groups and things because they want to come in and they want to have an impact and a change on the department. But we are a staff network, so we're there to support staff. Now we are there if people want to sound things out, if they want to consult, if they want to find speakers or stakeholders that they think they need to talk to. We're the people that they will go to get that information. The way that we see it is, we can't directly influence, we're there to educate we're there to be visible, and even through that, it has an influence. So if there was somebody, for instance, one of the biggest things the department involved in the moment would be the disregard scheme at the moment. There would be the submissions on this, and while we can't actively have a huge part in that, we're able to organise speakers to come in, talks. I think everyone that's working in that area are members of the network, so they are getting this information, they're getting this education from it, so they're being exposed and seeing the visibility. So that's us, as much as we'd love to be involved in a kind of a stronger way, it's we are the staff network and we have to represent the staff, but it's tough.
If I may, because I think we were the first local authority to have a network, and that's in 2013, and we certainly picked
Very much.
by a bit justice and equality. And one of the things we did, in fact, was we were very much in contact with other networks around the country, and we had set up some of the local authority networks around the country, including justice and equality, because I think it was in 2018, that could be wrong.
Yeah, it was.
2018, I was invited out to the Department of Justice Equality, as it was at the time, to speak about our experiences as a network. And what struck me there was that because it was chaired by the Assistant Secretary General, Karen Baxter, at the time, and the Secretary General was there. And it was the difference between the way our structures are in Dublin City Council and the way yours was. What really struck me was that LGBT people were asked for to talk about their experiences, and the senior management were there to listen. And that is why there's such a, I believe, such a very positive impact on the wider civil service. For ourselves, one of the big things that we wanted to do back in 2013 was to promote LGBT visibility and to promote LGBT awareness and education throughout the organisation, and that it should be done and led by ourselves with the support from senior management. That has to be done from the top of the work. So that was a bit of a challenge, but in 2013, the big thing that we decided to focus on, because we had set up in January 2013, and we put a focus on being part of Pride, because Dublin City Council at the time was one of the major funders of Dublin Pride, and there was never no City Council staff up until 2013 ever worked as Dublin City Council staff in Pride or joined Pride until then. And when we did, and the person that has joined us ever since is the Chief Executive, and he is very progressive in that regard and very open. But we had it was about 5 or 6 months or something, and I think last year it was about 200. We didn't even have enough of Dublin City Council staff. I mean, so there is that great progress. But there's still that lack of understanding that I believe, not everywhere, that if you're going to have real change and be a real open, diverse, inclusive and welcoming organisation, that has to be led by people with a lived experience. And so what we do is as LGBT committee members, we have a presence at induction for new recruits and at the orientation for the staff who are promoted. And what we do want to do is broaden that out maybe next year to include that we will talk to the senior management in the various departments, because that worked quite well, I think, in the law department, and it worked quite well for the senior management team within Dublin City Council. So.
Thanks, Martina.
Yeah, as embassy, I actually am in a quite privileged position that one of our goals is to promote equality worldwide, promote respect for human rights. And so when I was both based in Moscow and in Warsaw, also covering Belarus, there was a lot to do, or there was a lot to do, and there is still even more to do in those countries. So that made it relatively easy to say, okay, I want to work with LGBTQ plus communities in those countries. I want to support their prides. I want to, in Warsaw, I arranged my own track and said, okay, for the diplomatic community, let's all join in. And that was during our EU presidency 2016, just as the current government in Poland had started up. So, and that way, you have the advantage of showing your support. In Russia, I remember we had a popular blogger whom we invited to come to the boat parade in Amsterdam and report on that. And it was such a success that basically from there we now have always a group of foreign LGBTIQ plus organizations present at the boat parade. And in addition, of course, we have Shelter City, which provides support for those in vulnerable position coming here. And that focus on LGBTIQ plus rights means also that within the organization you build support for the people. Because it's like, if you support an organization abroad, you have to do that within your organization as well. And showing that support to the foreign organizations in a way makes it safer for people to say, hey, I can be different in my own organization as well. Yeah. But that's, for if I dare say so, that's the advantage of being an embassy, of being a foreign ministry. I can imagine that for the Department of Housing it's rather more difficult.
Of course. And indeed, we were talking about role models, and I mean, the Netherlands is a role model for other countries around the world.
But maybe if I can add one thing, and that is what is crucial, I think, is being demand-oriented. Talk to your organizations, just like you talk to the people within your organization. What do you need? How can we support you? What works best in your local context?
What I was going to ask you, Adrian, was did you get any pushback from the state authorities in Moscow or in Poland, or was it difficult to support the LGBTQ community?
Yes and no. Yes, I cannot say which organizations we funded, because that was not in accordance with the local laws, but it was in accordance with our moral laws, let's put it like that.
Yes.
But it's a difficult, organizationally it may be difficult, but from a moral perspective, for supporting human rights, supporting the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, it was very easy, in a way. I had no problem standing out. And just like we're participating here in Dublin Pride as embassy, that's very easy. And it's even, I would almost say it's more difficult maybe here in Ireland, because I have to look and see where can I provide added value. And in a country like Russia, in a country like Poland, it's much easier to identify, say, okay, these are the people who really need support. And this is the support that they need. Whereas for me as embassy, and we're coordinating the diplomatic community's effort for the coming Dublin Pride in 2023. In a way, it's more difficult to see and say, okay, what exactly can we do for you here? What do you want us to do?
Yeah, I mean, no, everything isn't perfect by any means here in Ireland, but compared to some jurisdictions around the world, it's an awful lot better. So the final question before we take we have a Q&A session if anybody does have any questions. But the questions for the panel. Oh yeah, sorry.
Can I ask Adrian, just on the Russian kind of area and fake news and whatever, I don't know what it's like, and I've never been to Moscow. What is it like for an LGBT person living in Moscow? Broadly.
Maybe it's just don't ask, don't tell. And I mean, I must say, I left Moscow in 2012. I came back 1 or 2 times. I've had some contacts with people within the LGBTQ+ community. I've done some things, support things myself, which are separate from government, in which I won't go into the details there. But how is life? I can give you an example. Not from Moscow, but from Belarus. Not that different. I had a good friend there, leader of one of the LGBTQ+ organizations. And we agreed. I went to Minsk. Had agreed to meet. He had to come from Vilnius, where he had been. And he called me at 11 p.m., well, almost midnight, from the border of the others in Lithuania, that he'd been picked out of the train, that the local authorities had checked his documents, etc., and they had released him just after the last train had left. Train station closed, midwinter, next train 7 hours later. So ultimately, I decided to drive over there and pick him up. But that's the kind of thing that sometimes happens to people, and it's difficult for them. Then you have the respect for how much power they have to still continue to fight for their rights.
So the final question for the panel is the future, and it's what do you plan on doing in the next number of years? How can we progress LGBTQ rights here in Ireland and abroad? Can we support our colleagues in other countries and other jurisdictions? So perhaps I'll start with Amy, actually, if you want to say.
So I'm going to continue on with my role in the LGBT community in Dublin City Council. So we do our inductions and be visible and try and have an impact on a positive impact on policy in LGBT lives. On a personal kind of note, I want to be an expert service user for transgender healthcare, and I'm trying to make way into that with I'm meeting a lot of barriers because I think the National Gender Service don't like to hear what challenges exist, and they believe that they are the experts and only want to show positive kind of outcomes of their service. So that's a personal challenge that I'm going to be trying to support. I know there's a lot of support there for the transgender community, 10 belong to, and we're moving in that direction, but I want to have a positive impact on that.
Thank you, Amy. Carrie?
Within the Department of Justice's staff network, we've spent a lot of years looking outwards, I suppose, looking for speakers to come in and talk to us about what they're doing and their experience and what they're doing for the LGBT+ community. We kind of looked this year and thought, let's get a little bit more introspective. Let's see what's going on within the department that we can learn more about. So kind of like when Amy asked me there, like, we want to get speakers in that are working in our own department and working on hate crime legislation, that are working on the disregard scheme, that are working on the gender-based violence work that's going on in the department at the moment, and we want to learn more about that and hear what they're doing. So we're taking a little bit more of an introspective look this year. We'd like to do more in terms of visibility, letting staff members tell their stories in front of the department so that they can hear them and that they can listen. I think it's so easy to look outwards, but there's such a wealth of information and experience within your own area, and we want to utilise that as much as possible. And a wider point of view, I would really like to see the civil service wide network actually become a reality as part of the LGBTI strategy. These networks, specifically in public and civil service, are completely voluntary. We're doing this work alongside our full-time jobs, and it's not easy. It's tough. There's a lot of balance involved, and my fear is that over the years, as this work increases, it gets harder. We're going to lose the diversity on our steering groups because there's just going to be certain people that can't dedicate that amount of time to. We're going to lose upper management of our steering groups. I think it's really important that this is central to the civil and public service in order for it to survive, basically.
I think as well that burnout is a huge issue, and I know I felt it myself in the work that I was doing, and by the end of by the end of my career in January this year, I was absolutely exhausted, and I didn't want to see any other LGBT people. I was sick of them all. I was sick of my colleagues in work. But you know, I've re-energized now, so I just recommend retirement for everybody to know. Martina.
Yes, just in relation to that and what we can and can't do next year and as we go forward, one of the things was, as people here probably know, that in 2017 we had our, and we were the only one in the country, I think, to do it, certainly amongst the local authorities, an LGBT employee inclusion strategy, which was very progressive and probably ahead of its time at that stage, for the simple reason it was written and led by the LGBT committee itself. There was no buy-in from management, though. That was the downside to it. However, we did progress it and push it ourselves anyway to get ourselves involved with the induction training and so on. We now have an updated LGBT employee inclusion strategy, which we've done in partnership with the Equality Office and HR. And we're going to see to it that the objectives in that are going to be rolled out in a positive way, and they can't be rolled out in a positive way unless we're leading on that, unless we have support from the management. And I'm interested that Kerry should say that we need to have a more introspective look at it. We need to do the same, because when you're there backing away, and you can meet quite a lot, believe me, resistance, and we did in HR, because we wanted to be representative of ourselves and speak for ourselves and open, make the place become more open and inclusive. It's great giving you know, money to have a nice coloured flag at Pride, and it's great to have a nice banner at Pride. But the reality on the ground for a lot of LGBT people, LGBT colleagues, mightn't be so present. So what we're going to do is, and what I think is just what Kerry said and what Amy said and certainly what you said, Philippa, the LGBT networks, or your diversity and inclusion networks, they are all voluntary, and there's an awful lot of work involved in them, and there's an awful lot of work, commitment, whether it's organising the social scene, if it's organising Pride in your departments, if it's doing any of that kind of thing, it involves an awful lot of work, and it can be just totally brain draining and exhausting, unless you have those supports, those real supports from the senior management. The other thing I would say, though, but I would say tell people not to give up and keep going, keep pressing on, because it is rewarding in its own right, and you can see the impact that we've had on that. Plus, we've also, as a city council, the elected representatives in June this year voted to make, I won't say overwhelmingly, but they did vote to make Dublin City an LGBT freedom zone. But that needs to be real as well, not just an aspiration, or not just a thing that's being ticked off at a city council meeting. It means that LGBT people need to be safe in our streets and need to know that it is an LGBT freedom zone. And some of the things that we can do when we're recruiting people, and maybe if we want to be able to help people, that it's not really our mission as local authorities, but throw it open, because it's one thing, we can put people in serious danger when we're talking about people in Russia or any of those other places, or Poland, who's an EU country. Put them actually in jeopardy if we start making noises, and these people need our support, and these that actually run them further underground. But we can offer them interns, and we can bring them over, and we can train them, and we can show them how we work with people on the outside. There's plenty of stuff that we can do, but it involves serious commitment, serious hard work, and I think our network should be given some more formal time and resources, and also at an organisational level, so that our departments, the various departments that we're in, won't have a problem saying, well, you know what, we need to free up Maynard and Amy and Heather and this person, let them go and do their presentation open housing, and let them do their presentation here, and let them make their video, and let them get just have a blast of Pride, you know. It has to be worth something in the end, so that you can enjoy yourselves.
Thank you, Martina, and I'll give the final word to Adrian.
Thanks, and I want to go in 3 levels. One, myself, personal development. How can I be more inclusive in all aspects? How can I be more strategic in my operations? 2, internally in the organization. How can we make sure that not just people feel safe now, but that they feel safe permanently, that we really have a diverse organization. Because a lot of times we just say, well, let's do something for the outside world, because it's safer. Safer because otherwise you have to be confronted with inequality in your organization, with unsafe environment. You have to address that. Thirdly, going outside, very simple, we'll be, as embassy, we'll be coordinating the diplomatics community support effort for Dublin Pride, which proves to be quite a challenge. So it's like having more signatories to the diplomatic declaration than last year. That's easy measurable. Making sure that we're there with more people than last year, and supporting more events, if I can put it like that, than last year.
That's lovely. I look forward to Pride next year for certain. Well, thank you everybody on the panel. Thanks Amy, Kerry, Martina and Adrian of course. And I'll open it up to questions for, we've got about 10 minutes, because I assume you want your copies. So any questions? This one there. Thanks, Jeff.
Hi, this is a question from Martina. I work for Dublin City Council also. I'm relatively new there. And the one thing that I found is that I couldn't see any structure that you had in Dublin City Council. I couldn't see any framework that had been made for you. I couldn't see any of your committee represented at any management level. I couldn't see consultations. That is a huge problem, I think, for the biggest employer in the state, the biggest local authority in the state. And also, I do think that every equality department in every public service should have somebody who is part of the network to give input. And also the thing you were saying there about people sitting down and representation. There seems to be very little management involved in any of this process. We have all of these wonderful legislations and bills and everything, but they're eyewash, because at the end of the day, I want to know what practical things were done in Dublin City Council to help you. And I mean practical. Like, do you have an office?
Okay, well that's a good question, and it's a challenge, and it's been a challenge for the LGBT network just to get recognition, basically it amounted to us, here's a nice colour flag for you, don't have a nice time of Pride. It's a serious challenge for a few reasons. That is when we start off with in 2013, 20 years after homosexuality was decriminalised here, not a gay to be seen, not allowed gay to be seen. And there might have been plenty of gays that people knew, oh, this person is gay, that person is lesbian, that person would think they might be trans, don't really know. And we didn't mind them, we were happy to put up with them because they really pass for straight. They don't rock the boat and they don't do anything, they just pass and look straight. So we kind of rocked the boat a bit, saying that here we are, we're a network, and we want to be seen as LGBT people representing ourselves. And we were met with quite a bit of resistance actually in HR. However, having said that, we also have to bring ourselves into it, and we need a deeper discussion amongst LGBT people ourselves. If you think about the public service and the civil service, we have, up until 1993, it was a crime to be a gay man. If you were a gay man and a gay man, it was a crime. You were an illegal person. Women who were married up until the 70s, had to leave the workforce. And there was a deep sense of shame, huge internalised shame that those kids, those 76% of our kids in secondary school still have, and that anxiety that they still have, that was still there. So it was not safe for you to be out of work. So some people who started work before homosexuality was decriminalised are still there, have never come out of work, have never felt safe to come out of work, and probably don't want to now because it's just, they feel unwanted, because here I am all this time being somebody that I'm not really. So there's those reasons. And it's very difficult because if you go, and sometimes the processes that are in place in Dublin City Council don't really work. We're great at having policies that, well, there's no consultation about, we have an equality, diversity diversity and inclusion policy. There's no consultation of the policy. They don't necessarily work because because they can become adversarial, because we don't have a culture of saying, oh, wait, hold on a second, that's not okay to joke like that about somebody. If we do, if it goes up to HR and it can become an adversarial setup. The onus is on the person, an LGBT person, to say this has happened and you have to have your evidence. There can be a hot potato kind of thing that can take place. In other words, well, it only comes to HR at a certain level, but you have to do A, B, and C local level. No, that's not for us, it's HR. And there isn't that sense of ownership as to who actually owns equality, diversity, and inclusion. And it should be embedded in the culture of our organisation, and it's not yet. So the practical things are, no, we don't have a home. We have very supportive managers, and very supportive managers in different departments. The libraries I would consider to be way out there as a great example of how to do equality, diversity, and inclusion. That doesn't mean they get it all right, but they're there, they just do it. There isn't an issue. Like I said earlier, when we spoke at the senior management team, we have a LGBT employee inclusion strategy, and when we spoke with Amy and I at the senior management team, and I said it to Samantha, who said it to Yvonne, they said that's great, we should do that here. But that doesn't automatically happen, and that's where you need the buy-in from the top. Yes, it's led by people with lived experience, but it has to have support from senior management. And what we would like to do is to speak about our experiences, as Kerry mentioned there earlier, to the rest of the organisation at senior level. But that should be set up by HR. We shouldn't have to keep asking for that should happen. It should just happen. And yes, we should have a home. Yes, we should have an office in the building, in the main building, that says, this is the LGBT committee's office, like the union reps do. This is the LGBT committee's office. We'll be here, whatever morning it is a week, whatever, twice, whenever it is. We're working on this, that, and the other, and you're welcome to drop in with your ideas and give us the support. So the practical things are still work in progress, actually, you know. And we'll get there. It's just a question of changing the culture of the organisation. And the culture of the organisation is hierarchical, manifesting predominantly cis, heterosexual, male. You know, so, but anyway.
Thank you, Martina. Yeah. Maybe time for one more question?
Hi, thank you everyone. It's been a really great discussion. I have a question, I suppose, for everybody on engagement. I work in a university, and we have our staff network. We have a kind of committee that works alongside the EDI unit. But what I found is that we have a small kind of core group who are at the events. They turn up for everything. They hold it together, I suppose. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on engaging that wider community? How to get more people involved? I love what you said about going from 4 people in Aspark to 40. That's amazing. But I suppose, are there any kind of suggestions on how to get that kind of wider engagement across the kind of workplace?
Who wants to take that?
I'll jump in. We've kind of done a few things. I think, well, we were all in lockdown, it was complete burnout with any kind of engagement whatsoever. There's only so many online quizzes you can do before everybody's like, I can't look at Zoom again. So there's a couple of things that we've, I suppose, implemented. Dave, who's our current chair, is here today, and what they've done is we now have a regular drink, basically. Every department knows about it, it's on the same time, in the same place, on the same kind of time, and it's great because the word spreads slowly. It's very casual, you don't have to RSVP, you just turn up. The numbers for that have increased every single time, and we expect it will continue to increase, and it's just because it's so simple. I think we all think we have to reinvent the wheel sometimes with our networks and have to come up with these incredibly original ideas for engagement. But usually it's the same things that we do that increase that people find familiar and that they recognise and want to be a part of. The other thing I would always say is don't underestimate, I know we keep coming back to this, but the lived-in stories, the lived-in experience. A huge part of our network is educational. We want to have a space to tell our stories, to let people learn about our experiences, and that comes through educational processes. We had a fantastic fireside chat last year, which Philippa was a part of on trans issues. We had Philippa, we had the mother of a trans child talking about their experience of it, and it had huge buy-in. And it's because people want a space to learn about what people are going through and feel comfortable asking questions. People are afraid to ask questions, but in that context, they're encouraged to. People want to learn, but they're afraid that if they ask questions, people are going to get offended. So it's like giving people that space, and that's where your ally membership really comes into play as well. Yes, we're here to represent our LGBT staff members, but without the ally buy-in, it's just not going to work. They're the ones that we want to reach out to. They're the ones that probably are going to stand up in the management board meetings and tell our stories. So I think, don't reinvent the wheel. Keep it simple. Tell personal stories and give people the space to ask their questions, and don't underestimate your ally membership as well.
When is the social one? Once a month, 366.
Third Thursday of every month,
Third
366.
I was at one a couple of months back, and it's great to network. I've seen people from all different departments. And you go, oh, you know that person, and I reckon kind of links up, and you kind of exchange experiences and have a chat and have a drink and relax. And I think that's really simple, because like meetings that I go to, the trans meetings that I go to, they're on set days and they're repeatable, and you can either go into them or not go into them. And same with the wider the drinks on 366. You can just turn up. You don't know what's going to happen there. You don't have to, if you can't make it, you can make the next one. So I think that's really important and simple, as I said.
Thank you.
I just want to add
One little thing. I'm getting signs from the back.
But just to say, I agree with Kerry and Amy, is to keep it simple and keep doing what you're doing. Because when we have used the same experience, I think Kerry, the Pride in 2013 with Dublin City Council staff, 5 people, but we kept at it and kept promoting ourselves and kept getting support and kept promoting our visibility, and as a result it was kept growing, and so we're now seen as part and parcel of the organisation, which is good.
Now, one thing I wanted to add, and basically building on what you said, alliances. Yeah? Like we have at schools, we have the gay straight alliances to allow people to say, I feel supported to be myself. Secondly, it shouldn't come, it comes from the management in a way, but what you shouldn't have is like included somehow on management. It requires leadership from the management, which also means that if you spend 20 hours a week on this subject, and your council says this is an important subject, don't be surprised if you can't deliver on everything else that would normally be in your portfolio,
Yes.
and reward those people for that work rather than say you didn't perform.
Yes.
And make sure that the other team members support you in doing those 20 hours.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and especially thank you to the panel. I think coffee is available now at the back of the room, so thank you, everybody, and welcome. Yes, yes.
evening, folks. Thanks for coming back, and welcome everyone who's joining again online. And for many of you who are here this morning, I think you'll agree it's an interesting session on kind of LGBTQI plus developments kind of in public service. And this session is called the Rainbow Green, and we were going to be introduced by the Lord Mayor, who's going to introduce the Dublin Pride CEO, Jed Devlin, and Megan Best, the CEO of Native Events, who are really the pioneers of kind of sustainability in the events industry in Ireland. Unfortunately, the Mayor is delayed, but very, very luckily, we still have a gap. We're delighted that Councillor Claire Byrne is here to deputise on the Mayor's behalf. So I would like to introduce you to Claire Byrne. Thank you very much.
Start this very unprepared. I was asked to do this like about an hour ago, so I apologise in advance. I also have no chain because they are all out at Christmas tree lighting events this week, so just have my own one. Anyway, the Lord Mayor sends her sincerest apologies. She was delayed flying back from Brussels, where she was yesterday signing a twinning agreement with Kiev, which I'm sure you all agree is critically important at the moment, and the citizens of Ukraine, both over there and those we welcomed here to Ireland, are very much in the forefront of our hearts and our minds at all times. So she was delayed coming back, so she asked me to step in for her. My name is Claire Byrne. I'm Green Party Councillor for the South East Inner City. So really great to be here today. I'm very honoured to have been asked to deputise for a number of reasons. This year is Dublin City Council and Dublin Pride's 25th anniversary of partnership. This partnership has come a long way since we first flew 8 Pride flags along the river in Dublin, and the Pride grant was about €200 or £200 at the time. That £200 is probably one of the best investments that the city has ever made. And Dublin Pride has grown to become one of the biggest community and cultural events in the city. 130,000 people, like pretty phenomenal. And it has played a huge part in making Dublin the kind of modern, multicultural, integrated city that it is today. It's worth noting that it was the staff of Dublin City Council that were the driving force behind this partnership. The Lord Mayor back in 1997 thought you were all a bit undignified, and of course now marching at Pride is the highlight of every Lord Mayor's year every year. And it was the work of the public servants in the council that developed this relationship. The team in the events department, some of which are here today, who saw the value in Pride and what it could bring to the city, and people like Martina Malone, who you heard earlier today, who along with the late Ed Bowden, who we all miss terribly, helped to set up the first LGBT plus staff network within Dublin City Council, which is a massive network now, and I have to say they do absolutely tremendous work. So next year we'll celebrate 50 years of organised LGBTQ plus activism in Dublin, and 40 years since the first Dublin Pride Parade, and 30 years since Ireland decriminalised homosexuality, which is not that long ago, we all know. And so we've come a really long way, and things are definitely changing, and there's no doubt that we are a kinder and more inclusive city, much more so than we were 30 years ago. And the LGBTI plus people still face a lot of discrimination in our society. In fact, in the past year alone, we've seen a very concerning increase in hate speech and violent attacks. This is a stark reminder to us that the work of Pride is not done. And as long as that is the case, Dublin City Council are fully committed to joining the fight to make our city a safe space for all marginalised communities. But we also face new challenges, challenges that 50 years ago we didn't quite fully understand, but today pose the greatest threat to our city and to our communities. In 2021, Dublin Pride joined a host of other civil society organisations and declared a climate emergency. In response to that, they produced a climate action policy, and they began to radically change how the annual parade and festival would be run in order to make it more sustainable. In doing this, Pride have reminded us that human rights don't exist in a bubble, and that the rights to clean air, clean water, and a planet that will survive for future generations and our children are really fundamental to human rights as well. And it's not just about climate action, it's also about climate justice. and understanding that the marginalised communities in society are the ones that will be disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change, and that existing inequalities that we already have will and are being exacerbated by the climate crisis, and we can see that across the world at the moment already. So in deciding to make climate action a key pillar of Dublin Pride, they're taking the action we need to protect their community, and by extension playing a critical role in protecting all communities, now and into the future. As the main funder of Dublin Pride, Dublin City Council is 100% fully committed to supporting this project. And I'm also really proud this year for myself to have had a small role, but also working with my colleague, Minister Oisin Smith on the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications to support Pride from a national level with some financial support in helping them with their carbon neutrality project, which Megan is going to present to you shortly. It's a small support this year, but I'm very hopeful that this will be the start of a long-term, wider partnership, and I think that contribution has helped kind of establish that baseline that is critical to moving forward over the next few years. Because like every sector, the events and the festival industry have to play their part in the climate challenge that we face and addressing that. But festivals and events are also really great test beds for trialling the kind of closed loop systems and solutions that we need to reduce carbon emissions across society. In previous life, I was sustainability manager in the events industry, and myself and Megan have spent many years together in fields, usually, rummaging in skips, pulling out recyclable materials, shouting at people for not putting them in the right skips, asking traders to use compostable materials, asking stages to use less energy, marching around fields on a Monday morning asking people to take their tents home. Things have come on a lot, it's a bit more sophisticated now, but I suppose that experience means that I know firsthand that this is not easy, and people who are invested or paying money to be part of something as significant as Pride, they want to make sure they're doing a good job, and it has to be pretty and it has to be exciting, and often the environmental impact of that gets left behind and ignored. But what is important is that events and festivals like Pride can, and I think will be leaders in the response to climate change. And they can work really cleverly as platforms for the sort of societal shifts that we all need to make, but doing it in a really interactive, creative and fun way. So I'd like to commend and actually thank Pride and Native Events for doing such a great job, but taking it so seriously and doing this in such a genuine, serious, holistic, thorough way, and I think in that sense you're a real trailblazer for the sector, and I think a lot of events and festivals from around the country will have a lot to learn from you from this year and in future years as well. So these partnerships with Pride are really good examples of how civil society, local government and now national governments as well can work together to build more sustainable events and to kind of champion that climate justice for all. And I hope that this is the start of more collaborations to come. The Greens and government are absolutely committed to supporting the events and the festival industry in playing their part in the climate challenge. So as I said, I hope this is the start of a wonderful sustainability journey together and a continued journey with Dublin City Council. So thank you all for being here today and enjoy the rest of your day. I will now hand you over to Megan to present what is, as I said, a very, very impressive, very thorough report that I think you will all be impressed by. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Claire. Thanks for the reminder of all of those days spending wandering around in the fields, pulling hair out and getting people to take down tents. Dee Valair, huge thanks to Jed and the Pride Festival team for having me here today, and I'm delighted to be sharing this climate action project that we undertook with Pride Dublin this year with you all. I'm going to just give you a little nod. So my name is Megan Best and I head up Native Events, which was founded in 2017, and we are Ireland's leading sustainable event solutions company. Our aim is to transition the Irish events and cultural sector to sustainable and circular models, because we believe that arts practices, events and cultural activities can ignite imaginations for societal change. Our approach takes in 3 pillars. So consultancy, which means devising those workable strategies and programs such as this one for both public and private sector organisations in all of those really high impact areas to include waste, energy, transport and communications. We also do event production of our own, so that's the curation, design and delivery of events, including conferences, markets, training days and activations. And we do eco-event equipment hire, so that's the supply of solar arrays and batteries to stages, films, exhibitions, and we do upcycled furniture and decor and arts installations, and we're moving into reusables too, in working in the circular economy. So in 2022, Native Events, together with Dublin Pride, created a climate action policy for the organisation. And this policy outlines Dublin Pride's statement of intent with regards to environmental responsibility. And it focuses on the impact areas of the festival. And it also outlines the specific commitment to each impact, so that progress can be measured and accounted for. From the climate action policy, we identified some key actions for impact reduction to be implemented at the parade and at the festival in 2022. And I'm going to talk you through these and the results of our carbon footprint analysis. So to start, let's take a look at a key action to explore and mitigate carbon emissions associated with the use of festival energy. The energy management hierarchy ranks energy management decisions, prioritising zero emissions and renewable energy sources. This can be achieved by reducing energy demand, specifying power requirements accurately, and this is a really important one for any event organisers out here in the audience today, because specifying power requirements at Irish events isn't a very common practice, or so we've discovered. Then you can look to use on-site renewable energy, and then using remote renewable energy like a green tariff. Our initiative with Pride Festival this year was to trial this new tool for festival organisers, called the MyZap Smart Power Plan tool, to reduce, accurately specify and measure the carbon footprint of power demand and usage at festivals and events. Now, we knew that this new approach to energy and power would need really clear guidance and collaboration with all of the production teams for successful implementation. The tool requires quite specific advancing information in more detail than is traditionally provided by event or professionals. The main goal of the Smart Power Plan tool, pre-event, was to gather the electrical equipment details from all of the on-site power users. So that's your traders, your stagers, your stages, all of the different people who are coming on site, through this portal. And engagement with the tool in the initial introduction was really positive. We were really excited. But as with the adoption of any new process or system, there are teething problems. The issue was with getting the information from all the power users. The platform was there and the dashboard was ready and interactive, but with the year that was in it this year as we emerged from COVID, the industry was on its knees. Lots of things weren't confirmed until really late. Traders dropped out when were replaced last minute and so on. People didn't really have that headspace or capacity to hand over the extra information. So we didn't quite get the Smart Power Plan completed, although the event did run on hydrogenated vegetable oil, or HVO for short, instead of the traditional diesel, which did actually in the end save 85 to 90% on our carbon emissions, but not achieving any of the efficiency that we would have liked. Okay. So here you can see the CO2 emissions, just 163 kilos, from the 487 litres of HVO that was used in generators at the festival and Merrion Square, which is a pretty exciting result. Okay. And here's the really interesting piece. So this is the comparison between HVO and traditional diesel. So this is a real win-win slide for us. By switching to HVO, the festival saved just over 1.3 tonnes of CO2 emissions, which is a huge saving. But we would have liked to reduce the numbers of generators that were used on site and the associated transport, obviously, that goes with these, through better energy efficiency, which is something that we can look to do now in 2023. Next. So to understand the festival footprint, we use the Julie's Bicycle Creative Green Tools, which is a carbon calculator developed specifically for the arts and cultural sector. So our carbon calculations produced an estimate of 1.3 tonnes of CO2 emissions associated with the festival's activities. Production travel calculations were based on information provided by the production manager, And calculations were made by multiplying the distance in kilometres by the vehicles, which was mostly trucks and vans, the CO2e unit per kilometre. We used the UK government's 2022 greenhouse gas emission conversion factors for this. But the emissions that we didn't get to account for in this analysis included activation branding materials, temporary staff travel, and waste produced at the festival site. And the reason being only because we couldn't get our hands on these figures in time for our report. But we will capture them next year, mark my words. So next. Another key action, this is the fun one, was an on-the-ground audit of the Pride Parade participants. So the leaders of the participating groups were identified during their check-in with the Pride team at their allocated parade start location. NATO Events managed to survey about 50% of the parade, or just over 100 participating groups, on their materials and the transports that they used. So the purpose of the audit was to estimate the CO2e of Dublin Pride's Scope 3 emissions. Now, as you all know, no doubt, Scope 3 emissions are defined as those that are not produced directly by the company itself and are not a result of the activities from assets or owned by, controlled by the company, but those that it's directly responsible for up and down its value chain, which is the bulk of an event's emissions. So the Scope 3 emissions that we were trying to capture was the waste from the festival and parade, the travel, the parade groups and the participants, transport of site infrastructure and production materials, and the purchased goods and services, so food traders, decor, merch, tickets, and physical communications. I love this one. Our audit showed that T-shirts made up a massive 94% of all material emissions associated with the parade. And of this 94%, 90% of the emissions came from the manufacturing of new T-shirts. It's a real eye-opener, and I think it's an indication of a major driver of climate change that we're all experiencing now. It's all of this stuff that we're producing and consuming, let's face it, often unnecessarily. Our results also showed that the new flags and new and reused banners made up 5.1 or so of total material emissions, with flags, which are a hugely important part of the parade, being the biggest culprit here. But the environmental impact of these is more down to plastic pollution than it is the CO2 emissions associated with their manufacture. So ultimately, our analysis showed a total carbon footprint of 27.5 tonnes of CO2e, or CO2 equivalent, associated with materials used at the parade. Yeah. Dublin Pride's central city location is ideal for access to less carbon-intensive modes of transport, as we all know, such as walking, cycling and public transport. So it's easier for a city centre festival than it is for those that are more remote around the country. The wide-reaching nature of the event, however, means that participants and attendees travel from outside of Dublin by car and by bus. Understanding the impact of travel represents a huge challenge to any event or festival, and Claire knows this intimately. We tried to do it for many years, where information must be gathered to calculate emissions. Of the participants that we audited, travel-related information focused on gathering the most commonly used modes of transport for these groups. And public transport actually made up 60% of the respondents, followed by bus hire at nearly 17%, and cycling, walking at 14%, which is a great result, although obviously we'd love to see more people taking that active travel. So to arrive at all of our figures, we undertook a bit of a research project to ascertain some of the averages. So an individual travelling a return distance of 16 kilometres by bus, that's in from Malahide and back out again, that's what we used as our average, wearing a cotton t-shirt, mass-produced and imported to Ireland, who eats an average fast food meal for lunch, and I think people are eating those less these days, but resulted in a total of 5.6 kilos of CO2 emissions per participant associated with attending the Pride Parade this year. So 212 groups participated in the parade. The groups consisted of LGBTQ plus community organisations, youth organisations, political parties and government bodies and agencies, and Pride partners and allies. Our staff, a team of 8 of us, audited just over half of the groups participating. We only had an hour to grab them as they were getting set up, so that was as much as we could do. For the half that weren't spoken to, we made some assumptions and average emission factors were applied. So as I've mentioned, the emissions accounted for in the audit were the materials, the new or pre-owned t-shirts, flags and PVC banners, the transport, walking, cycling, public transport, private bus hire or car sharing, And the lunch, the average fast food meal, including a burger, chips, soft drink and packaging. And I learned a lot about Coca-Cola doing that little piece of research. We can have that conversation another day. So the next one. So here's the really interesting one. So the total emissions profile from the event, including the scope 1, 2 and 3 estimates from the parade and as much information as we could gather from the festival. Now this is still incomplete because we didn't get all of the information that we needed to include in the carbon calculation. We didn't get the waste associated with the event, although we will get it next year. But I think that this really points to the impact of our material choices and the need to reduce and embrace reuse and the circular economy. So a total of nearly 59.6 tonnes of CO2e, nearly half of which was related to materials. So we know what the focus needs to be in 2023 because you manage what you measure. Okay? So in conclusion, organising a large-scale event such as a parade or a festival, or both, as these bonkers guys do, for more than 13,000 people is both a science and an art. Doing so after 2 years of lockdowns with a big, bold new agenda, recognising climate justice as a human right is particularly ambitious. Pride Festival Dublin should be commended for the courage, time, energy and passion that they brought to this project. And the process was also a huge learning experience for our team. Organising a large-scale event and threading that climate action through the briefings for 13,000 people is in essence an exercise in multi-stakeholder engagement. And it requires an extensive communications campaign. So considerable time and coordination must be given to this in order for it to succeed. And in the case of many large-scale festivals, it takes years or many iterations for all the participants to fully understand and embrace that narrative of sustainability. Native Events were delighted to work with the Pride team on this hugely important project. And we were inspired by the ambition and investment made by senior management and the whole team. In spite of many challenges, huge steps forward were taken by the festival for both its own productions and in stepping into a leadership space in the wider Irish festival community. So we look forward to continuing this work with Pride and to move forward with pushing for sustainability, circularity and climate action with every single project that we undertake. Very much.
Megan, thank you, Claire. If anyone had any questions that they want before I start rambling on, you're more than welcome to ask.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So, as a Pride partner, like the company that I'm part of, we got new banners and t-shirts. So, what would be your recommendation? Like, can we go to those suppliers and ask them to recycle the banner, or kind of like in a way that we can just reuse the t-shirts that we got like this year for next year? What would be your recommendation?
Definitely reuse. So the t-shirts that you have, try and get them printed without dates on them so that you can use them again and again. Give them out at the start of the parade and ask people to return them, put them somewhere safe so that they don't get lost in between, and try and use them as many times as you possibly can. You might even do an upcycling workshop with your team who are coming to maybe dress them up a little bit with some, kind of jazz them up a little bit for another year to get everybody involved in a creative project with it, but definitely reuse them, the answer. Just behind it. Here, will I stand back up?
Have you compared the Pride Parade, say, to the St. Patrick's Festival or other sort of similar parades? Is it more greener? Is it less greener? Or what way?
Great question. We actually have done a carbon footprint report for St. Patrick's Festival as well, but I don't have it with me. And I probably have to check with them because I don't know if they're publishing that publicly as of yet. What I would say is that both parades are employing circularity and reuse, as far as I'm aware. And actually, you guys are sharing a lot of the same equipment for float builds and all of this kind of stuff. And both have shown great ambition in moving in this space. So I can't say that one is more ambitious or more climate friendly than the other right now. I can't answer that one directly, but both are making strides, yeah. Is there another one? Yeah.
Is there anything that the City Council, the Executive of Aberdown the council members can do around the city to improve energy efficiency?
Great question. So those guys that I was speaking about, the MyZap portal that we were doing with the Smart Power Plan, have done projects in both Amsterdam and the municipality of Manchester. So essentially they did a massive survey of all of the city events that go on in both of those cities over the year, and they created a Smart Power Plan for the city itself. So they looked at all of the areas that are used and activated for the various different events, and then created the Smart Power Plan so that when the city was doing upgrades to grid connections and so on, the public grid connections, that they were able to incorporate that so that they were able to really get a good understanding of like where a trader island might be, where a stage might be. Merrion Square is a pure example of this. If we had really decent grid connections in Merrion Square, we probably wouldn't need to bring in any of those generators. And then I wouldn't have a job and it would be great, because that's what I'm working towards. So yes, there is loads that the city can get involved with this. The second piece that I will say to that is that Native Events is a co-signatory to the Green Deal for Circular Festivals, which is an initiative of the Dutch Ministry for the Environment. One of the new parameters or work that project is doing, the Green Deal for Circular Festivals, is moving into a development of a project for Green Deal for Circular Cities, and seeing how festivals and cities can learn from each other in the world of circularity and circular policy. So yes is the answer, and there's loads of international examples that we would love to chat to you about. Let's do it. Anybody else?
Sorry, just on the Dublin City Council part, I don't know. Are you speaking to the likes of events in Dublin City Council? Is this a project that I work for Dublin City Council, but I've never heard of yourselves. Okay. I would organise events at a smaller level than Pride or St. Patrick's Day Festival, and lots of the area offices would too. Very small community events. So are you in discussion with Dublin City Council in relation to this and plan action, or do you know that they're doing something in relation to this, or is it just a piece of work that hasn't been touched yet?
It's been touched on very minimally. We did reach out during the lockdown because we wanted to bring this idea to Dublin City Council, and we spoke to the Parks Department about it at the time, because and there was actually funding available at the time as well to upgrade outdoor spaces. So we were like, this is an ideal opportunity. So we gave the presentation to a couple of the city architects around it. The conversation obviously didn't go anywhere, but that seed has been planted, and we would love to continue. So.
Can I just say very quickly on that, we have very clear commitments in both Dublin City's Climate Action Plan and the National Climate Action Plan. In the next couple of weeks we'll publish the updated National Climate Action Plan as well, where there is very clear targets and commitments around public and local authorities and all public sector, looking at how they can also reduce the carbon impact of their events as well. So we will start seeing things change hopefully in the next year, fingers crossed. But yeah.
That's exciting.
Is this the first year that you've done this? Yeah. Sorry. It's your first year, yeah? And you'll be doing it every year?
I don't think we'll ever audit the parade again, or if we do, it might be in 2 or 3 years' time, because it was a huge job. And essentially what we wanted to do was just get the benchmark, get the understanding of the impacts, get the really highlighted information, like the t-shirts, for example, which I'm going to keep banging on about because I just think it's such an eye-opener. And now we can start working with Pride and with the stakeholders and with that engagement and communications campaign, and potentially maybe in 3 years' time redo the audit and see what's changed. But I don't think it would be something that we would attempt every year, no.
It's very innovative. It's very clever.
It was a pain in the ass. But we're delighted that we've done it because it's such an incredible data set to have, yeah.
You make it look so easy.
If you have what's the price? What's the price tag on making it more sustainable or more climate friendly?
How long is a piece of string? Yeah. Our approach with everybody that we work with, and we work with a range of arts organisations, public sector bodies, private festival, the whole gamut. And generally speaking, we tend to go at a very bespoke kind of approach to it, don't we? where we have a really good listen to what people need, what's achievable, what the priorities are, and then tailor the approach to that. So we might only do a little bit of climate literacy training for an events company, or we might go in and work alongside the entire team on a waste reduction strategy, or, I mean, there's some really big things afoot with Fall to Ireland and with the Arts Council. So the answer to that is depending on the ambition and budget available, really. Oh, there's loads of questions.
Hi, sorry, there, in terms of the t-shirts and stuff, we do a lot of t-shirts and work in terms of like merchandise and everything. Is there anything around like offsetting the carbon footprint that the t-shirts create, if that was to keep going in terms of making t-shirts and blah blah blah? Is there places you could donate? And yeah, is that hopefully questions make sense?
No, it makes sense, yeah. And the offsetting conversation is a really interesting one because people have started to shy away from it now, which is not a shame because we are still putting CO2 into the atmosphere, so we do need to do something about it as quickly as we possibly can. I suppose the perspective shift that's needed is to move towards reuse and to start to think about other ways that you can engage and other ways that you can do merchandise and other ways to activate the second-hand and the reuse and the circular economy that we keep speaking about. So it might be a case of instead of doing merchandise that's brand new every year, instead running those upcycling workshops, there is mountains and mountains of textiles here in the city and warehouses around the city that need to be reused. So there's other ways to go at it and other ways to get people engaged than just buying a brand new t-shirt. So that would be my first go-to. But in terms of offsetting, I would be very keen to see more people embracing it. And then there's another new term that we just learned the other day, which is insetting. So taking the carbon emissions or whatever it is, or taking the opportunity to invest in sustainability initiatives within your organisation, or in projects that are very close to you in your local community, investing in local community gardens so that people can get their hands and teeth and knowledge back into nature. Investing in the cycle to work scheme so that people can get off the public transport or get out of the cars and get active travelling, because obviously transport is the really big nut in this country that we have to crack. So there's loads of different ways to go at it, but honestly, because materials is such a huge driver, that manufacture, consumption, distribution and eventual disposal of materials is such a big driver, that the reuse message is one that we'd like to drive home.
Maybe just one question for you. I think it's a fantastic presentation. In terms of large-scale race events, so one of the problems that you have in large-scale race events is the use of a lot of single-use plastics for drinks. So people just taking the drinks, throwing them on the ground, and then it's litter. Would you have any kind of sort of sustainable solutions to that? For I'm talking races that are, you're getting more than 10,000 participants.
This is for like water alongside the race course.
Just the drinks, yeah.
There are some really nice examples that have been certainly growing in use on the continent in the UK. I've seen them less so here. There's pods of water that are created out of the seaweed. Have you seen these? And they dissolve automatically.
Is that in London?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's about having those conversations with the suppliers and with the sponsors and seeing if it's something that they would be interested in trying to follow up on, because you're right, the single-use plastic that's associated with those kind of events is pretty insane. And it goes for everything. It goes from banners and signage right down to, as you say, the single-use plastics for the drinks. So it's about having the conversation with all of the stakeholders and seeing if you can get people to get involved in this message, and then seeing what's out there and what you could do to bring it in.
Thank you.
Is that it? I think that might be. Yeah? Okay.
So we started this whole project back in 2021. We started off with this message that climate action was really important because marginalised communities are always disproportionately affected by any crisis. And we were also conscious that history has told us that whenever there's a global crisis, marginalised communities get blamed for it. That just always happens. We, as a community, know it from history. We triangle that we had because we got blamed for the things. We've seen how that happened. So that was always a big driving force for us. But one of the things we also do is we talk a lot about intersectionality and understanding intersectionality. And intersectionality is this whole mechanism where the different oppressions or discriminations you face mix together, and they mix with the privileges that you have to create you. So one of the big things we learned from this project was that actually we have a whole load of privilege. That yes, we're the LGBTQ, yes, we're very marginalised, but we're also Dublin. We're one of the richest countries in the world. We're in the top 10 GDP. And throughout the whole process, as we were learning, because education is key to everything, as we were learning, we spent a lot of our time finding out more about the impact of climate change, about the impact of our decisions and our actions. We realised that our initial target, which we very proudly proclaimed, is that we would be a net carbon neutral event. That wasn't actually good enough. Now, the reality is that that 60 tons of carbon, we'll offset that. That's part of our plan. We're going to offset that carbon. But we also realised that we're not actually foresters. I'm not sure if foresters is a word, but that's not really our job. That was very easy. 60 tons of carbon isn't actually that expensive to offset. That would be done. We'll have a nice pride forest, indigenous trees. We'll do that. But actually, when we take and we consider our privilege, we need to accept that we need to do more. That aspiring to be a net carbon neutral event, when you live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, is just not acceptable. So for next year, we're going to build on it. We're renewing a relationship with NATO, we're renewing a relationship with the Department of Environment, with Dublin City Council, and we're going to push even further. So what we want to be, instead of being a net carbon neutral event, we want to be a climate positive event. So that's our new target. We want to be climate positive. We want to accept we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, so we have that. We also want to look at what is it we do best, like what is it that Dublin Pride brings to the table. And we know it's not forestry, because I hardly even live outside the two canals, so I'm not going to go planting forests, so we will have somebody else do it. But what we bring to the table is that we are really good at shouting. That's what we do. We are famous for it. We've changed the constitution of the country, we've changed the laws of the country. We are really good at getting thousands and thousands of people behind an idea. So a big part of our mission for next year is to take that, the thing we're good at, and to use that as a power to create a climate positive event. And that means that from this point on, we're saying that climate action is a key pillar of Dublin Pride. So from now on, we're committing that at every Pride Work event, at every one of our conferences, we are going to have an education session on climate action. That's going to be part of every one going forward. Just as we talk about diversity, inclusion, we're just going to keep with it. We're going to keep making this a key pillar. And we're going on the basis that when Pride was founded back in 1969, it had a charter, and the charter said out of the ideas and ideals of the common struggle and of our fundamental human rights, we would have a demonstration on the last Saturday of June every year. We never said LGBT, we said human rights. So we're making that a thing. That is our commitment now, that will be part of it. What we're going to do for next year, we have commissioned this report. We wanted a warts and all. We didn't want to go, oh, we were great. We wanted to know exactly where we were falling down so that we could do something about it. Some of the figures, we have a much more detailed report that we're going to release out so that everyone will be able to see it. We've analysed the impact of floats. That was a huge one. Last year we went from, we said no more diesel trucks or flatbed trucks and no more big trucks. We would have these push-pull, really good climate positive floats. And of course we didn't factor that they were going to be delivered on the back of a flatbed truck. Instead of driving 2 kilometres through the city, we drive 20 kilometres around the city. So next year we're going even further. So when it comes to the parade, we're saying no corporate floats at Dublin Pride. We're cutting them out. It's community floats, yes, because we have to balance it. For us, for so long, all we've ever had is our flag. That was our tiny bit of a symbol. So it's acceptable that we'll have community floats. What we're doing though, we're renewing our partnership with St. Patrick's Festival, so we'll be sharing floats. They won't be single use. The floats we built this year have been built to last at least 10 years. So we'll get, each time we build a new community float, we own it, we manage it, we'll get a good 10 years out of it. Within the corporate section, we will allow some exceptions for electric vehicles, but that will be very small numbers and it will be based on them not being single use. So if you're going to brand your car for Pride, that's not happening. If, like on us, for example, you have a Pride branded electric van that 365 days a year drives around Dublin City and happens to drive in the parade on that one day, that's fine. But single-use plastics will now, even in terms of vehicle wrap, will be banned. That's our next step. In terms of some of the other things, we will no longer put years on our t-shirts. So we're aware that by clothing, the issue is this fast disposable clothing, so we're going to take a step. We're going to ask all of our sponsors and partners, do you need your logo on it? Could you just have a Pride logo on it so that it can be used in other places, so that it can be donated onto a charity? You know, do you have to put your logo on it, or can we do it differently? We don't even have to put Dublin, so you'll see from our snazzy new sweatshirts, we've just gone with Road, we've gone with Pride, which means that it can be used anywhere in the country. It doesn't have to be single use. And then in terms of food, we're now looking at being able to have a circular food village at Dublin Pride, so that not only will we reduce our carbon impact, but we'll take that job that we have, the thing we're really good at, which is education, which is visibility, and we'll make ourselves an example. We'll use Pride to teach people. We'll use it to get them to eat their first vegan burger, to get them to bring their dishes back. Pride will be able to play a role there. So that's what we're embarking on for next year, and hopefully everyone's going to join in, and we're all going to have a proper climate positive impact, and they're going to see that that's something that Pride can take ownership of. We can say, this is our job. June is about human rights. It's not just LGBT, it's all human rights. Human rights don't exist in a bubble. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming to our Winter Pride at Work conference. We've got some more events on over the rest of the month. The biggest one is that our Pride Hub is back open, so it's on Johnson Place for the month. So it's a mixed place where you can go and get some Christmas presents. We'll have Dublin Pride stuff. GCN are going to be stocking their items. Shout Out, a number of other charities will be. So you could buy your Christmas presents. You can get crafts from our artists like Colin Roy and House of Dacker, so you can fill your stockings out, knowing that it's going to a good cause. We'll also be running a number of community events over there over the month, and fingers crossed next year we'll be announcing that we'll have a Pride Hub as a permanent feature in the city. Thank you everyone for coming today. Thank you Claire, thank you Megan, thank you this morning to Philippa, Martina, Amy, Adrian who's wandered off, and Kerry, but thank you all for everything. We have some lunch before you go, so make sure you eat all of the sandwiches because food waste is not part of action. So you have to